because you ask me something which is so difficult, like you might as well ask me the riddle of the universe. But I have been advisor to the British government about Brexit. And Brexit came about because of the deficiencies in the European Union that I think may be a good way to have new ideas for the Eurasian economic community, because what was wrong? We have very famous economists here. Professor Prodi is one. So obviously I will try not to step on his toes, but there were mistakes made in the European Union. And one highlight of that is perhaps the statement of the Swiss parliament that led to, they asked, are you planning to have a European superstate? And the answer from the European Union was not in the short term, which made the Swiss say, thank you very much, we will not become members because we cannot accept that the court of the EU will have higher value than the Swiss Supreme Court. And what I was going to say, if I come back, and if you allow me, Mr. Chairman, I'll come back to Brexit, because I'm sure that that must be a burning issue here. I come from a country which actually founded your country. My ancestor Rurik, who came and founded the Kingdom of Kiev and then the rest of Russia. And I have grown up with respecting your great and powerful Russia. I like Russia more than many Russians. I like Russian music and Russian literature and the Russian culture and the Russian renewed Christian religion. And I think everything is, even if the economists here are very important, and as the speaker just said, economics is terribly, we know it is important, we all have to buy our loaf of bread, but even if you're very, very rich, you can only eat 3 times a day. It is very important to remember that far more important than economics is possibly peace. And you remember that the communists, the Stare Kommunister, they love to have peace institutes. And this is why I, to prepare for peace, have formed a war institute, because it has been the other way round recently. Now, I think it is very important to, as I said, I respect the big Russian bear. And I also know that it is not wise to irritate or wake a bear that is asleep. And I think that the European Union, well, no, it started with Bush Senior, who said that we got to have this common. Before Gorbachev came out on this, in '89, Bush Senior says that we got to have a new Europe. Whole, free, and at peace. The question is, what does it mean at whole? We don't have to be all united into one unit. And Gorbachev in '84 to '87 went on talking about the common European home. Now, this was repeated later by the European community, by the European Union, that developed certain neighborhood schemes. Neighbors, from Europe, and a professor at Oxford, I do not think of Uzbekistan as my immediate neighbor. And to haul in the whole of what I would consider would be the Russian interest sphere into the EU as their best friends. European partners, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. Okay, at the same time, Mr. Putin has his near abroad scheme, and I think most people who are interested in history would accept that those countries are certainly within Russia's interest sphere. And it's very dangerous to trample in there and have conflicting, irritating ambitions. Now, My eldest son, Peter Frankopan, Dr. Peter Frankopan, head of Byzantine Studies at Oxford University, published what is, as a mother, you must forgive me, obviously very proud because it's #1 on the bestseller list. It's called The Silk Roads. And his point is, he thanks his mother only on page 620. I'm trying to forgive him for that. But he says that, because I gave him a map when he was a little boy that he had over his bed, and he was saying, why do I have to learn about Henry VIII and Hitler when, you know, everything's to be happening further east, the religion and whatever, the Crusades and whatever. So his first book was called The First Crusade, and the Silk Road is all about that, you know, the old Silk Road towards China shows where the center is. And since the topic of my slot here, as I understand, is Eurasia in movement, I can see that clearly. Now, it doesn't mean that the United Kingdom falls off the map into the water or drifts off towards America, because on the contrary, it may be a new contracting partner for Eurasian community, because Brexit, you must remember, they then Mr. Prodias, Professor Prodias, the chief economist here, will understand what they must be saying in Brussels. They have lost 18% of their revenue when United Kingdom is the 5th biggest economy in the world. And United Kingdom has the history of having had an empire. They got friends all over the world, in India and in Australia and Canada and all the members of the British Commonwealth. And to compare that with what's happening in the European Union, perhaps I should say that the last speaker said so well, it might have been better if it had been smaller. You remember de Gaulle, who said, no, 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 to the Brits when Britain wanted to join, and they said they don't have the same mentality. And because I'm qualified as a lawyer, both in France, Scandinavia, and in England as a barrister, believe me, the Swedish law is virtually the same as in Russia, Portugal, or Mexico. Whereas the law in England, it's a precipice between the law as we understand it on the continent with the civil law systems and the common law in England. Could be one reason for war. There's so many misunderstandings, and you have to explain everything very clearly when you talk. I talk to my, although I'm educated in both systems, because that is, do not expect that the British mentality is different in many ways, and especially in the legal sense. Now, I wrote a book called The Suicide of Europe, and this was published 1 month before Brexit, and a couple of weeks before Brexit. It was written within 1 month before Brexit, because I felt very strongly, it was very sad that the European Union had developed some bad habits that could not be rectified. And it would have been better, as the previous speaker had said, the original 6 got on very well. But like all empires, like the British Empire, the Roman Empire, the Soviet Empire, if it's too big, it starts to crack. And this is what happened to the European Union, because once you stretch your fingers too far, especially into other people's business, like I cannot see the interest of the European Union in Uzbekistan. And that is perhaps one way of saying it. So United Kingdom decided to leave. It left divisions in families, in universities. One reason was coming back to the important question of money. The academics said, oh, my funds, they will all go. I have no money more, because everyone's been led to believe that the European Union is very rich. It's not. It doesn't have a penny. It cuts the membership fees, which are enormous, and they get agricultural levies, and they get what they call as own resources. And I'm not an economist, and I know my incompetence in that subject. Like Aristotle says, the most important thing is to know what you don't know. In my case, I'm a specialist in torture and terrorism and war, and this is what I don't know. But when I saw own resources, I started to look, what is that? That is a couple of % of the VAT in 28 member states. But we're talking about millions. And I said to them in Brussels, why don't you say that? No, it would be diplomatically unwise. So the truth is never unwise. The truth is always a good thing to state with some courage, even if people dislike you for it. And I am not, as a lawyer, I try not to be political, but I think there's another bond which is far more important than money that ties us together, and that's possibly the Christian religion. And we've got to protect Europe. We've got to protect the Christianity of Europe, and I don't hesitate to say that, having been advisor to Saint John Paul II for 25 years, and who also always said, do not be afraid. And I try to be, at times at least, courageous in that field. Now, the thing about the difference between Eurasian Community, Economic Community, and EU is one simple thing. EU would be fine if it was a free trade area, but it is a fortress Europe because as a customs union, there is a wall around it which excludes Russia, United States, and above all, developing countries. Well, I'm glad I'm not a footballer, but I know that much about it, although I would have liked to have a yellow card first. Isn't that the rule? Thank you. I welcome questions.